Okay, so this is Series 2, Episode 10, and I'm speaking with Jack Waley-Cohen of What3Words fame and of QuizQuizQuiz fame, and I think these are the two things I really like to talk about today. So should we start with What3Words?
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm sure you're sick of doing this, but if you could explain to people what it is, in case they don't already know. I'm sure most people do by now.
Yeah, it depends where people are from. Well, thank you for having me, and it's nice to talk about these things, which hopefully are of interest to people from all different walks of life. So yeah, What3Words is a way of precisely communicating a location anywhere on the planet, and the way we've done this is we've divided the world into a massive 3 meter by 3 meter grid, and that gives you 57 trillion grid squares across the entire surface of the planet. And we have allocated, or our algorithm has allocated, a unique combination of 3 dictionary words to each one of those squares. So you can precisely communicate any 3 meter square on the planet with just 3 words. So, for example, filled count soap is the What3Words headquarters in London, or there's a 3-word address near number 10 Downing Street, which is input caring brain. Just totally coincidentally. There's so that's what it is essentially. It's a way of converting latitude longitude coordinates into a human friendly words, and as I guess most people who listen to this podcast understand, words are somewhat more human friendly and fun than the numbers to work with.
Yeah, when I first heard of What3Words, I had one of those moments where, of course, how come no one has thought of this before? It's such a brilliant, simple idea and so accessible, as you say. So how did it get started?
Yeah, it is interesting. It has that quality of, when you first hear about it, as you say, it's like, oh, that just makes sense. It's just such an obvious thing in a way. But I can't take any credit for the conception of the idea, unfortunately. But I can tell you the story. So one of my co-founders, Chris, was in the music business and was running gigs and private events for weddings and things like that, and trying to get his musicians to places, perhaps villas in the middle of the countryside in Italy, or remote countryside places, wherever, was a real struggle. When he realized most of these places didn't have a proper address and people couldn't find them, he started giving them latitude longitude coordinates. Chris, being quite a technical chap, thought, well, of course everyone can happily tap in 15 numbers into their sat nav, and this was not entirely compatible with the normal way of operating for musicians, and people would turn up 1 hour in the wrong direction, having slightly mistyped 2 of the digits and all of that. So he took this discovery of the problem to a friend of ours who is a mathematician, and Mohan, the mathematician, very quickly said, oh, well, we could just combine words rather than numbers, and we don't need as many, we only need 3 words. So that was kind of the inception of the idea, and I was very lucky that Chris thought of me as someone quite early on who might be able to help them get the idea off the ground. So I think I was involved on day 2, I think. So yeah, I wasn't at that first meeting with Chris and Mohan, but from that point onwards, we were kind of building the thing together.
And of course, it requires somebody who understands words, because that you are going to run into problems. I mean, one thing I was thinking of earlier in anticipation of this was, what about homophones? If you're telling people coordinates by, say, you're doing it over the phone, you could run into real trouble there.
That's absolutely right. I mean, it's interesting that there's a few things to sort of talk about on that front. I mean, numbers themselves have some homophone issues, 80, 18, that classic, what has someone said? But it is a prevalent issue with words, and it varies vastly from language to language. Just starting in English, for obvious reasons, starting in English, we worked out early on that this was something we wanted to solve for, not just homophones, but also spelling variants. So if someone said, I'll meet you at colour theatre there, you got some problems going on already on each of those words, depending on whether you're American English or British English or how you're spelling there. So we worked out a way. We worked out that we wanted to remove these as much as possible, or only have one of the possibilities, so that we could then build in correction systems, so that if we did have words that are homophones, there'd only be one of them in there. So if someone said a word, any kind of person hearing it would just go for it, and the system could then correct for mistypings or misspelling. So for example, we wouldn't have colour or colour, both British and American spelling. In other languages, the problems are even more. In some languages, there isn't an issue with that at all. In some languages, the problem is just horrific, like in French, for example, where every plural sounds the same as its singular, or the past participle with the e acute sounds the same as the infinitive with the er. So we had to come up with different approaches to different languages to solve for language-specific issues.
Yeah, I was going to bring this up, but it's a good problem to have, that your business has been so successful that it's gone global, but then you are confronted with this entirely new problem of dealing with other languages. And of course, you have to deal with euphemism, I guess, and things like that, where a word that's quite innocent in English, if you translate it to another language, it might have a double entendre or something like that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So the system has now been built in more than 50 languages. I think we're just about to release languages 53 and 54 or 52, and I can't remember exactly, but it's more than 50. And in each language there are unique complications. One of the issues of using words rather than numbers is that words are not universal in the way that the numbers are broadly universal. So we had to address that challenge by building the multilingual versions. It's worth just mentioning before I come on to your thing about euphemisms and different meanings, is that each language version is built independently. So table, chair, spoon in English would not be at table, chairs, whatever the French word for spoon is. I can't think what the French word for spoon is, but they're not one-for-one translations, because
Okay.
you just can't do that for all sorts of reasons, and a lot of languages just don't map to each other one-to-one. So we build each language completely independently. We build our word list, and we put the shortest, most common, most easy to recognize words in the parts of the world where they're most likely to be used based on where the language is spoken, and kind of take it from there. So that means that people in Mongolia will get better English words, better Mongolian words in Mongolia, rather than being left with perhaps the longer, more complicated words that they would have if you're using the English version in Mongolia. So that helps, because that means we can treat each language completely independently, and we have an amazing team of linguists running the process, and they recruit an army of native linguists all around the world, in lots of different countries, depending on where the language is spoken, to sift through tens and tens of thousands of words, making judgments about the words, to give opinions as to whether there might be some hidden meaning there. And it's a very human process, which is, for a tech company, is an interesting sort of underlying thing. The humans are doing the work, supported by a nice little system that flashes the words up on the screen and they press buttons, but ultimately human judgments come in, and yeah, there's the odd thing that slips through, but hopefully not too many.
Yeah. Have you run into problems with people not being happy about what their location is called?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, it comes up occasionally. Ultimately, 3 meters by 3 meters is not a very big area, so you're pretty unlucky if every possible 3 meter square that you might want to use to describe a location is something that you're not happy with. So there's always a pretty straightforward solution to that. And added to that, frankly, in a lot of countries, including in the UK, there's some pretty dodgy place names in real life. If you there's someone who worked for us years ago, who's our first CTO in charge of our technology, built a map that was the map of rude place names across the UK, and you can have quite a lot of fun finding that. And if you live in a place with a rude place name, that's just what it's called.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about this earlier, because of course people do like to travel to places with funny names and have their photograph taken by the sign.
Indeed, yes.
I wonder if there's a similar kind of tourism with What3Words.
That's a really good question. There is a little bit of that. So particularly when we work with big automotive companies, or I know they're big companies who want to do a bit of a stunt, drive your Land Rover to an a location that matches up with a slogan or something like that. So there's definitely an element of that. And there was somebody, I can't remember who it is. I wonder if I can remember, who is doing a bit of a pilgrimage to a relevant 3-word address at the moment. So yeah, there's definitely some of that. There's definitely some of that.
Yeah, I guess you would have discovered all these things that perhaps you hadn't thought of that they could be used for. Let's talk about some of these. Let's start with the serious ones and then move on to sillier things, even though we've just mentioned the silly one. Of course, there are some places in the world where people are living in poverty and their addresses are essentially unknown. And so this app has actually helped them be identified and helped them to get whatever they need, in terms of emergency response or even something like deliveries.
Yeah.
I mean, was an intention or?
Yeah, funnily enough, I mean, well, not funnily enough, I mean, that was in the first place what we thought that was perhaps likely to be the most powerful use case, and it really is very, very powerful. And we know of a lot of humanitarian and sort of non NGO type usage around the world that has put What3Words to good use, whether it's in refugee camps, for example, where you need to know where people are, or in favelas in Rio de Janeiro, for people to get things delivered. We know that What3Words has been used in disaster relief in the Philippines and other places. We know it was used, again, nothing that we had a hand in, just apart from making the tool available for free for people to use in circumstances like that. We know it was used in some of the Afghanistan evacuation scenarios a year ago or so. So yeah, it is very, very powerful to see it being used in ways totally organically. There's only so much that we can do as an organization or as our salespeople. You're not going to go hammering down the doors of organizing, next time there's an earthquake, use this. You just make there be awareness and make it easy to use and make it be a thing people have on their phone. And if it is the right tool in the right circumstances and people like using it and find it easy to use, then that's pretty compelling, I think.
Yeah, I mean, is there a feeling now it is replacing coordinates almost everywhere?
I think in some places it possibly is, in terms of people actually understanding the idea of the importance of communicating a precise location. Having a means to do it by words is, makes it, in some ways, is not really a replacement for coordinates, because I think people who like to use and are comfortable using latitude, longitude coordinates will probably continue to use them, and that makes complete sense if it works for them. People who have never used coordinates might use What3Words as a better version of, or you need to go to the end of the lane in the old village where the tree got chopped down 20 years ago. Actually, it gives them a way to a new language for that. And even in the UK, where postcodes are a very, very accurate proxy for most kind of addresses, lots of places don't have useful postcodes to describe the location. So it kind of it provides a new layer, really, rather than necessarily replacing anything.
Yeah. Would you find a lot of delivery companies are using the app?
Yeah, so for delivery companies, we try to work with them, and actually that is one of the ways in which we are able to make money as a business. We give the app away for free for people to use in their everyday lives. But for delivery companies, where being able to know with certainty and precision where your next delivery is, you can plan your routes better and inform your customers of the delivery slots better. And we've done a whole bunch of tests with delivery companies to show that it really does save them time and therefore save them money. They will pay us to integrate What3Words into their own systems, so it's in their back-end systems and it's on the devices that they give to their drivers, and they do use it. We've got commercial deals with several of the big UK companies, so Hermes, or Every as they now are, and DPD, and with DHL. So a lot of these people are starting to use What3Words, and as the end users, that the customers who are receiving the deliveries know more about it, and the shops, people you buy things from and enter your delivery address, know more about it. The whole ecosystem starts to tie up, and hopefully makes everyone's lives a lot easier and saves some money for everyone and time as well.
I was going to ask you about the financial side of it and how you make money, because the world has changed a lot in the last 20, 30 years, and businesses do have to give a lot of things away, even tiny businesses like poetry presses, or poets trying to market their work. I think, well, how many poems shall I put on Twitter, and how many should I include in the book? And are people who follow me on Twitter not going to buy my books because they get to read me every day anyway? Or by putting the poems on Twitter, am I gaining a bigger audience, a certain percentage of which will buy the books? So it's all very complicated. I'm sure it's very complicated for your app as well. But you mentioned delivery companies as one source.
That's right. So delivery company. So our general ethos is that individual users and emergency services and humanitarian uses and people who are using it for business for very low volume, all of those people, we feel that it benefits the wider ecosystem if they can just use it for free. But big, and we're talking potentially millions of pounds that they're saving by being more efficient in their deliveries. They should be willing to, and have proven willing to, pay us for the privilege of using our system. So car companies who build us into their sat navs, we've now got, I think, 18, 19 different car companies around the world, including sort of Mercedes and Tata in India and Jaguar Land Rover in the UK, and around the world. They pay us to integrate it into the onboard navigation system. So it is a balance, and very much what you described with with your work. And we have that as and when we get on talking about quiz stuff. I have that with my my quiz business as well. It's this balance, and the way you describe it is really interesting. You do need to give things away for free to an appropriate level to help stimulate the commercial side. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting dilemma for anyone these days.
Yeah. And of course you have this humanitarian element. I'm not sure my poetry does, but
well, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So yeah, because it's helped. Your app will have saved lives, with the emergency response usage.
Yeah, in the UK, around well over 80% of, it might be 85% now, of the UK emergency services is on a county by county basis, and cities and different regions have different services. But yeah, a large majority of them advocate the use of What3Words, and we hear stories. On a daily basis, often several a day, coming in, and these are just the public ones that people tweet about or post on Facebook about, and then behind the scenes we get some stats from emergency services telling us, not for public consumption, but how often it's used by them. And this is now happening in the US and Australia and Canada and a bunch of other countries as well, and across Europe and the rest of the world. So yes, we are trying to make a commercial success of What3Words, and we have spent and continue to spend a lot of our investors' money on trying to do that. And we think we can succeed commercially. Whether we do or whether we don't succeed commercially, it's quite something to have created something that saves lives. I don't think it's too trite to say you can't really put a price on that.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So that's the serious stuff.
Yes.
A few people who don't know that I know you have suggested to me in the past that I must do something with What3Words. There must be some poetic application. Have you encountered anything like that?
We have. So there are some people who write poetry inspired by random 3-word addresses and the locations of those. There've been 3-word sort of poetry competitions that I've seen. I'm just doing a quick search now because I can't remember what they are. Yeah, if you type in What3Words poetry, you find a couple of interesting things there. Found poetry with What3Words, so share a location and then create poetry with those words. So just to sort of trigger some ideas and some thoughts. We've seen people create art around 3-word addresses. We've tried to hunt for palindromic 3-word addresses, which have been interesting. We didn't do tremendously well, but we found aside from spot, radar, tops, would be nice to find something that's a little bit more sort of crosswordy than that. But there are some we found a few. So yeah, it definitely has the ability to inspire some creativity.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about anagrams, finding two locations that are anagrams of each other,
Yes.
and then traveling between them, perhaps.
Yes, that's a very interesting one. Yeah, that is an interesting one. I don't think we've really looked at that, so maybe that's a nice new challenge. The 3-word anagram addresses.
Like say the 3 words palindromes, it will be difficult because the middle word would have to be a palindromic word. Oh no, not necessarily. But
I think you'd be able to run across the words. Yeah, never ever even is one in Dublin that I found just earlier, just when I was just sort of reminding myself of what we've done palindromically with What3Words before. But yeah, it's difficult to find ones that are more complicated than that, really.
Oh, that's good. I mean, I was going to also mention lipogrammatic places, and of course that's both a lipogram.
Yeah, perhaps that's true. That's very good.
So, well, moving on from What3Words, obviously you were involved with this. You were invited to be involved with What3Words because of your interest in language and your expertise in language. So I'd like to talk about that and how that started.
Yeah, that's interesting. So after university, I had a proper job for a couple of years, and then a friend of mine from university, a tennis friend, had started a business, and it was a translation company. And I was always interested in the businesses that people I was at university had set up, possibly slightly regretting that I'd taken a proper job rather than being, entrepreneurial for myself. But it was kind of quite handy to earn some actual money coming out of university, which isn't necessarily the case when you're starting a new business. But when I decided I had enough of working for a bank as I was doing, I got in touch with this friend of mine and said, look, I'm kind of up for trying to help out. And the main criteria for me was to have a bit of freedom to work with him and to kind of try and help him run the business. The main criteria for him was that I should be willing to really not earn anything for a couple of years. So I moved back in with my mum, and took virtually no salary for a couple of years. And it was a translation company, using the kind of the relatively early days of the web and web technology. This was 2003 to 2000, from 2003 he'd set the business up a couple of years previously, and connecting freelance translators around the world over the internet, which suddenly was very easy and people were doing because everyone was now on email, combined with his expertise at internet marketing, and meaning that people found us rather than anyone else when they were looking for translation companies on search engines as they evolved. And I'd always put recreational linguistics on my CV, sort of slightly tongue-in-cheek, knowing that would be something people would probably want to talk about, and anything where you can display a passion for stuff in interview, I thought was a good thing. And it always came up in interviews when I was trying to get jobs at university. So it was kind of a nice marrying up of the two.
So you wrote a lot of wordplay tricks or poetry, perhaps palindromes, anagrams?
I would say I've never been very good at writing them or creating them. Anagrams I've always loved, and have went through phases of sort of writing crosswords, and particularly enjoying the really sort of strong sort of anagrammy wordplay stuff. But it was just something I loved consuming as much as creating. And you can't help but try to create when you're a consumer of that kind of thing, as I'm sure as a sort of art creator of wordplay. But yeah, it's just always been something I've enjoyed, from as much from the consumer side as the creator side.
So you've actually made some cryptic crosswords.
Long time ago. Again, I don't. That's sort of evolved a bit over the years, more into the sort of quiz question creation, and having the sort of more puzzly, wordy side of quiz questions. So yeah, I mean, I guess we'll come on to that. But if ever you're watching Only Connect, then yeah, if it's a wordy question, chances are probably either I've written it or had a heavier hand in editing it than my colleague David, who's more has more of a hand on the sort of the trickier sort of quizzy stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard it, but a few episodes ago I interviewed David Astle, the Australian crossword setter.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard that one yet.
No, I have no idea how complicated it is and how many extra rules there are about what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do when you make them.
Yeah, there's a lot of different, different publications will have different variations on those rules, aren't they? But there's a reasonable set of standards that most people abide by. But I would definitely class myself as very much an amateur in the crossword side of things now. And if we're doing a crosswordy type question on a show, I've got a couple of go-to people who'll pretty much always check with them that we're not breaching some convention by mistake.
Yeah, well, I'm very much an amateur when it comes to solving them. I don't. I think I have some of the skills to solve them, but I do not have the patience.
Yes. Well, if you see some of these videos of the top people solving things quickly, if you get really good, you don't need any patience because it only takes about 10 minutes to whip it off. But yeah, I'm in awe of people who can do it that quickly.
So you clearly like all sorts of word games and all sorts of games, all sorts of quizzes. Because is it right that you were a contestant on many game shows before you got into the business yourself?
Yeah, that's right. So when I was at university, so I was sort of 1998 to 2001. It was kind of, so quiz shows go in phases. They're sort of a bit cyclical. There's massive gluts of new shows, and then there's a bit of a lull and gluts again. And sort of late 90s, early 2000s, there was a bit of a, it felt like it was a bit of a boom. Challenge TV was just starting, and people would look for cheap content as there were more channels and so on and so forth. And also being the relatively early days of the internet, there was this great confluence of there being lots of shows and being able to find out about them because people were discovering that you could recruit for contestants on the internet. So a group of friends and I really spent a lot of our university time doing pilots and run-throughs for new shows and getting onto Challenge TV and Channel 5 shows that were just kind of desperate for contestants, filling their schedules and with cheap shows. So yeah, the first show I ever went on was Countdown, which was kind of how I got into it. I did okay on Countdown, not brilliantly, but okay. And from there, sort of Weakest Link and things that no one will ever have seen or remembered unless they're real aficionados, like Challenge TV Defectors and Channel 5 sort of Brain Teaser and Win Beatles Money, all sorts of things that very much in the archives now.
But Countdown and The Weakest Link are kind of immortal shows now, aren't they? Especially Countdown, and Countdown's the classic.
They are, yes, exactly. Yeah, I was so nervous when I was on Countdown. I was kind of 18. It was the first time I'd ever done a TV show. I thought I could do quite well, and I was good at it, but I didn't. Yeah, I just didn't really do. I think I won 3 shows. Could have done better. Nowadays on Countdown, I mean, the standard has just gone up dramatically with the prevalence of ways for people to practice and learn online. The standard of the best contestants or the standard of your average good contestant now is way higher than the standard of the average good contestant was, when I was on it and before that. So yeah, if I thought I was good then, I way off the pace now for sure.
I'm very envious. I think I would have loved to have gone on Countdown. Because I was studying mathematics as well, so I liked both sides of it.
Yeah.
But did you like the mathematics side?
I did like the math side. I did. I was always quite good at the math side, and I like maths and I like numbers a lot as well. I had one numbers game which I solved, but I messed it up when I was giving my explanation. But Carol Vorderman had not solved it, and once I'd remembered my method, although I didn't get the points for it, I was given the opportunity by Richard Wiley to show my method so that I can, officially prove that I had beaten Carol at the numbers game, even though I didn't actually get the points for it.
And what was The Weakest Link like? Because I imagine that you say you were nervous on Countdown. I think I'd be more nervous on The Weakest Link.
Well, The Weakest Link was interesting because I had done quite a few run-throughs when they were developing the show. I remember a very early run through of The Weakest Link before it may or may not have even been known as The Weakest Link at that point, but it was clearly what turned out into The Weakest Link. There were prizes rather than cash. The money chain would have different prizes. I can't even remember, but it was, so I'd been involved from very early on, and I was on it in the first week of the show's broadcast, I think. So round about, it was sort of August, September 2000, I think. And it hadn't really we didn't know about it at that point, so it hadn't been broadcast by the time I'd recorded it. So you didn't know about Anne Robinson's persona, and I won my show. I was doing, I did reasonably well on it. I was, good at quizzes for the standards of the weakest link. So yeah, it's just like I don't think I was nervous at all for the weakest link. I think I would have been had I been on it after seeing it being broadcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In front of Anne Robinson. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so from there, anyway, I'd like to know the journey from being a contestant on these things to being such an important part of them.
Yeah, it was an interesting journey, and some of it I mentioned to start off with my sort of proper job. I worked for a bank for a couple of years after university, and quite early on while I was there, I thought, oh, there must be some kind of, company quiz that they run. So I discovered that the Charity of the Year committee ran quizzes. This was for Deutsche Bank, where I was working, which was one of the biggest employers in London at the time, probably still is in the private sector. And so they used to run about 12 or 15 quiz nights a year for the staff. So I got in touch with the people running it, and the lady who was running it said, oh, I'd love it if you could run the quizzes. I love writing the quizzes, but I don't want to run them. And I thought, okay, fine, I'll host the quizzes. Done a bit of that at university with the University Quiz Society. And as I was doing it, I thought, okay, we can spice these quizzes up a little bit. I took some inspiration from some pub quiz masters that I'd enjoyed attending their quizzes in terms of ways to present well and add some music and just make it a bit more interesting. Then I had the revelation that, hang on a second, if Deutsche Bank has 15,000 employees in London running 15 quiz nights a year, might it be the case that any company in London and in the UK thinks that, oh, what should we do for a fun company night? Why don't we do a quiz? And they probably organise it themselves, and it probably wouldn't be great. But if they were willing to pay a few £100s to get someone in to do it professionally, then maybe there's a business there. So that was kind of the inception of QuizQuizQuiz as a business to host corporate quiz nights. So that's kind of where we started. So when I left Deutsche Bank and joined my friend's translation company, at the same time, that's when I set up QuizQuizQuiz to host quiz nights, and it kind of took off pretty quickly. There was clearly demand, and people were searching on Google for company quiz nights and quiz events and all of that, and they were willing to pay for it to be done properly. So if we could deliver that, then there was a business, as it turned out to be the case. So yeah, that was kind of the inception of professional quizzing, basically.
Wow, what a pleasure that you can do something you enjoy so much.
Amazing, yeah, amazing.
All the business.
Yeah,
and of course, then, what was the connection to television, and how did you get involved there?
Yeah, so I think in the early days we were providing quiz as a service, and occasionally we get inquiries about people saying, oh, can you set questions for us? And then the odd TV thing or app type thing started to creep through. We're making an iPhone app or a game for a website, and we need some questions. So it was kind of a natural evolution there. We did a few TV things in the early days, which we didn't do tremendously well. We did them okay, but didn't really enjoy them. It's a very different kind of thing when you're setting questions for other people to use rather than for your own usage. You don't quite understand exactly what use they're being put towards. But yeah, gradually we built up a bit of a reputation as a brand running quiz nights, and we'd run quizzes for people who were making TV shows. As it turned out, they'd turn up at a brand launch, or they'd happen to be at a school PTA quiz night that we're running the quiz at. So kind of thought, oh, if these guys write good questions and know what's entertaining, maybe they could do TV stuff. And so we started making that an official part of what we did before we were actually doing it officially. And yeah, a couple of interesting sort of connections came in, and then I guess the real sort of turning point, I guess, was when I found out that the first person who had been in charge of the questions on Only Connect, a chap called David Bodicum, who had done the questions for series 1 to 8, that he was someone I know quite well. He was standing down from looking after the questions. And I knew the team on Only Connect because I'd been on the first episode and in the first series. So I got in touch with them at his recommendation and said, look, can I throw my hat in the ring for this? And as it turned out, they had already identified who they wanted to be in charge of the questions, but they said, well, why don't you write questions for us? You know the show, you like the show, and you do this professionally. So that was kind of the turning point. And then we wrote lots of questions for the show, and that then gave kind of the company CV points that gave us the credibility for writing questions for other shows. And yeah, so it kind of then built from there. And when the second question, Etherin Only Connect, was ready to sort of pass the baton, then luckily I'd made myself the obvious sort of contender with my colleague David, who I work with. So when your question editors of Only Connect, then that's a really strong CV point for the business. And so it's really, we've done huge amounts since then in the last 5 or 6 years for a bunch of shows that some of whom no one will ever have seen because they didn't do that well. Some of whom are really mainstream now, like, I don't know if you've seen the 1% Club, successful new Saturday night show. So we worked on that. So yeah, it's been a nice steady but natural evolution.
And for anyone listening who doesn't know Only Connect, it's a fantastic show. But I have to say it's difficult. It's obviously intentionally extremely difficult. There's some questions I look at, I think, no one can get this. No one on earth can answer this. And of course, some contestant does get it, and I feel stupid.
It is deliberately and intentionally difficult, and it celebrates the cleverness of the show and the contestants. But yeah, I think one of the things about Only Connect is, although it's very hard, it's a balance between the team's ability to do it and the question's ability to challenge them. And a question ultimately is a failure if no one can get it, and actually no one could have got it. And I can think of plenty of examples where we thought, do we go for the slightly harder version of this or the slightly easier version? We went for the harder version, and then you're sitting in studio seeing it happen, you think, I think we went the wrong way on this, and they just don't. They get nowhere near, and it's broadcast, and it's like you can tell from sort of the Twitter sphere that no one was ever going to get it, and we got our judgment wrong there. But yeah, if you get the balance right, then it's a real joy to see people solving these really hard things.
Yeah, well, that's the nature of boundary pushing, isn't it? I think that's what you're trying to do with that show. That's why it's such a great show, in the way that you're seeing how far you can go and how far you can test people.
I saw something in. I know you've just had a show in Edinburgh, and I've been following the sort of comedy up there. And although I don't think neither of us are particularly qualified to talk about the Jerry Sadowitz controversy, I did see somebody who I'm friends with on Facebook saying, if you're going to be edgy, occasionally you fall off the edge, and you kind of got to accept that. And it's the same with pushing the boundaries. Occasionally, if you never go the wrong side of the line, you're not pushing the boundaries hard enough. And I guess I don't know whether you feel that sometimes with your poetry. You go kind of a bit OTT on some constraints sometimes, and but yeah. If you're trying to push the boundaries, then you got to push them hard enough.
Yeah, exactly. I think with the poetry, it's a question of how far can I move away from meaning and just enjoy what's going on with the words. Yeah. And I tend to find that I have these periods where I'm really doing that all the time, and then I have to go back to doing something simpler, something more coherent. But then I get bored with that and I jump the other way. It's this constant back and forth. But I suppose you might have that as well if you're writing for other shows that aren't as complex as Only Connect.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. That we've just written for a show which hasn't started yet, but it's going to be on ITV, I think, in the autumn, called Ridiculous, which is not a huge leap from something like Only Connect or 1% Club, where in a way everyone should be able to solve them. It's just a question of seeing your way through the layers of obfuscation to work out exactly what you're being asked. And yeah, so I really like the fact that we work on. I keep on talking about we. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's me and my colleague David, or the wider team. But anyway, I really like the fact that we work on stuff at all different levels, because you kind of want to get it just right for the level you're writing at. But even within that level, you're pushing people a bit harder in one direction sometimes. And actually, whenever we start working on a new project, we always write a bunch of test questions for them as part of getting to know them, where in those test questions we will deliberately push the boundaries quite a lot harder than we think that they're looking for, because then they see things and just say, "Oh, this is a bit much. This is a bit too fiddly for this format." And like, okay, cool. Well, we kind of understand where the lines are, and then you get your range of reasonableness for what everyone has in mind for a particular show.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. You'll have to tell me, but I've had the honor of being involved in a question on.
Yeah, no, go for it. It has been. It has not been broadcast yet. But we can talk about it but it has been recorded.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I won't say what it is, but I'll just say, yeah, it's an honor because it's a great show. So I'm very pleased to be involved in some small way.
Your question will be in the Christmas special Champion of Champions show, and they don't get the answer right. And we thought about a few ways to nudge the question to give them a few hints, but we didn't in the end. So it may seem to some of the viewers that it's one of those ones that's a bit too hard, but it's a work of beauty. And I think we'll stand. Often when we're writing questions and putting questions on Only Connect, we sometimes take a call that maybe the question is too hard or too easy, but it's beautiful in one way, or there's supporting information that Victoria can talk about with the teams that brings the 2 or 3 minutes of TV to life. So sometimes it's it is we're making an entertainment show. Ultimately, there's no prize at the end of it. It's got to be fun and interesting. So sometimes questions are amazing questions and they tick every box. Sometimes they're an amazing question, they're a bit too easy or a bit too hard, but they're lovely and we go for it. Sometimes the question is maybe not quite as we'd like it to be, but there's some really interesting chat to be had, and that makes it worth having. So there's all sorts of different sorts of questions. So yeah, we'll have to see what the listeners and viewers make of your question in the Champion of Champions show. But anyone listening to this who watches that show, they'll know it when they see it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Conversation, yeah.
Well, it's even more of an honor then if it's in that show, a big show.
Yeah.
I just hope that people don't come after me. This is why did you allow that ridiculously hard question?
I don't think they will. It was interesting. I got to know you and your work via the sort of the palindrome world, and I think I discovered Mark Saltite, if I pronounce his name right, and he introduced you and a couple of others, and so we did a palindrome question of do I say John Agee? Is that how his name pronounces his name?
Agee.
John Agee. We did a palindrome Only Connect question with one of his palindromes a couple of years ago as well. So it's quite nice to be able to sort of introduce some of the work of the constrained writing and the poets and the palindromists onto Only Connect, because it's a very compatible world.
Yeah, I think I remember John's, and if I remember correctly, that wasn't answered.
It was answered.
It was. Oh.
We did it in the Christmas special, wine and cheese special, where all the questions were kind of Christmassy or foodie, or and we did Go Hang as clue 1, A Salami as clue 2, I'm a as clue 3, and the teams had to work out that they needed Lasagna Hog as clue 4, which they did work it out. They were suspecting a palindrome after clue 2, but didn't really they didn't know that particular palindrome, and then by clue 3 they thought, okay, obviously they had enough information to work it out from the letters that were already there. So yeah, it played out really nicely.
Better than mine.
Well, we'll let everyone else be the judge of that.
Well, I know John, so I'll have to concede to him. Yes, they answered your question. They didn't answer my question.
Yeah, but there's a couple of others, including from you, that we've talked about by email in the past, that we kind of got sitting there waiting for you kind of got to let it pass a few years before repeating a question type. But there's a couple that are waiting in the wings potentially.
Yeah. Well, the one I can think of, I think people might get it. Yeah,
I think they will.
I won't say which one.
Yeah, and it's very much the same sort of thing as Go Hang a Salami, and that you can kind of see what's there, and it has that slight palindrome feel to it, because it's sort of not quite, the meaning isn't quite what you'd expect, and so you look deeper and then you see the letters.
Yeah. Well, we have to stop talking about this then, because we give clues away.
Exactly.
One more question on wordplay, because this has just come up a lot during this series of the podcast.
Yes.
Given the phenomenon it's been over the last year, Wordle. What are your feelings on Wordle?
I mean, I enjoy it. I have played it. I'm just looking at it on my phone. How many times? I've been doing it for, let's see, my statistics. I've done it 231 times. So I've been doing it for, not since the beginning, but since for a while anyway. Yeah, I like it. I think it's a nice thing that people are playing a word game, and that has helped it become quite mainstream. I'm delighted for Josh Wardle, who managed to make some cash out of it, because not many of us in the word and quiz world, it's not something that one monetizes tremendously easily. So it's nice to see that someone's done that. But yeah, it's good. We have a What3Words Wordle group. There's 30. We've got 150-ish employees in the company, and there's 30 plus people who will post their Wordle grids every day. I'm usually the first because I've got young kids and in the habit of getting up quite early. But some of the younger people, perhaps they're doing theirs a bit later at night as a sort of after, sort of before bed thing. So yeah, it's nice. I like it.
Yeah, I did my first one on January 1st. So
Lovely.
I've done it every day this year. I still haven't lost one. So I'm determined to get to the end of the year.
Brilliant. And then I think you'll retire?
Yeah, maybe. But I bet you it's the New Year's Eve when I fail.
Yeah. And do you always do yours at the same time of day?
Yeah, first thing in the morning.
Yeah, first thing in the morning. I have missed a few. I forgot one day quite recently actually, and I got a couple wrong. I've had a couple wrong at sort of after longish days, and I can't quite remember. I think one I just wasn't really paying attention, and one I had one of those ones where you do a bit too well too early, and then there's more than 4 possibilities of the letters remaining, and you just go the wrong way.
Yeah, that's a fundamental flaw with the game, I think.
Yeah,
and I've nearly lost a couple of times that way, when you've just got all the letters apart from one, but there are 20 different options for that letter.
Yeah, several different ones. If you get a bit lucky too early on, and then you're very unlucky. Yeah. Anyway, well, good luck with the rest of your streak. May it be a 365 100%er.
Well, I hope so. I'll be very disappointed otherwise.
Yeah. We tried to jump. We did jump on the Wordle bandwagon by
I was going to mention this,
by creating, and we just thought, well, look, lots of people are creating other things. Like, why don't we have a crack at it? And I had a chat with our developer who builds some stuff for us, and we shared it, batted a few ideas around. I thought, okay, well, let's just throw this out there. And we did it for about 3 or 4 months, but unfortunately with quiz questions, they don't write themselves, as it were. And we just found it was a bit too much work. And we thought maybe if it becomes a thing that we've got tens of thousands or more doing it, then it's actually a really good thing. But we never really broke out of our core audience. We've got a core audience of people who do our Friday quiz every week and all of that. So we never really went far beyond that. So we felt like it was a nice thing to do for our audience for a few months, but I just got a bit tired of it. So okay, well we'll put that on to bed now. And it was a nice thing to have tried.
I'd like to end by talking a bit about being an entrepreneur in general, because you've obviously had 2 very successful businesses, and I'm running a business that isn't so successful because it's poetry. Are there any tips you could give people, or me in fact, about how to go about it? I mean, when I look for tips on running a business, people tend to focus on finding the right product to sell. But that's very different if you've already decided you're going to be, for example, a poetry press.
My absolute top tip from which normally I'm talking to people in the sort of in the technology world, because that's What3Words is the highest profile thing I've done, and sort of business wise, and What3Words is ostensibly a tech business, but my mantra is always, you just got to become a sales and marketing business as soon as possible. Like whatever your product is, however good it is, and I think the What3Words product is very good, and I think the quiz product is very good, and I'm a massive fan of your work, Anthony. I'm a frequent retweeter and enthusiast on Twitter. I absolutely love it.
Thank you.
But ultimately, however good the product is, just telling people about it is the hardest, is the hardest thing in a way. And so I think whatever the business is, even if you have the best technology in the world, or the best stories in the world, or the best gizmo in the world, the biggest challenge is just focusing on sales and marketing, because usually that's not what the creators of the underlying thing are naturally wanting to do, or naturally good at it. But I think that is the only way really to make headway, unfortunately, for any in any business. And actually, What3Words is, we are a sales and marketing organization. Really, we've got an absolutely phenomenal marketing operation that produces great content that help people understand the business, and salespeople who have got the energy to travel around the world meeting businesses and selling it. And of course, you can't do that if you haven't got something worth selling, but that sort of has to be taken for granted, that you've got something worth talking about, and then it's just finding a way to get the word out there. And it's really hard. It's hard.
Yeah, it's finding the right path. I mean, I'm assuming a lot of it is trial and error, and you've had 2 successful businesses, but I'm sure there have been plenty of small failures along the way.
Absolutely. David, my colleague at QuizQuizQuiz, has just written a book which I'm co-author on, although it would be doing him a disservice to suggest that I really did much other than just check the work that he had done. But anyway, we've got a quiz book that's being published any minute now. I'm just trying to think, okay, this is something new that we've got to, it's not branded, it's not an Only Connect quiz book, so we can't leverage off that brand. It's not a quiz book, because the publisher he said you can only sell a quiz book if you've got a TV show brand name behind it. So if you haven't got that, then it's just a quiz book with 10,000 questions in, and that will sell. But yeah, going back into sort of baseline mode of like, okay, we've got to kind of contact everyone and use the contacts and use the people who've got reach, the kind of reach that we haven't got. I mean, we use our own reach, but it's not very significant to try to make impact. Yeah, it's an interesting challenge, going back to basics and thinking, well, what do we do? And seeing if people like The One Show or Good Morning are interested in having a chat about it, all that kind of stuff. So for want of a better word, you've got to pimp yourself out there, really.
I guess it's interesting, because it's very tempting when you've had a small amount of success or a big amount of success in one area. It's very tempting to just cling to that and not try anything else. But it sounds like you want to keep trying new things.
Yeah, doing new things I find fun and exciting. And I mean, there's a privilege in having had some success or some association with successful things, that you can then use that to your advantage. And the fact that we have worked on Only Connect, it means that we can say to people, we've written questions for, we're the question writers for Only Connect, and that makes them more likely to want to have a chat about it or look on it. And so building on those things is, it is a privilege to be used and abused, but it doesn't get you all the way by any means, and sometimes doesn't get you any other way because it's not the right connection. But yeah, doing new things is, I find, exciting. And I think if you're sort of always impatient for the next thing, then that I think that's a good thing, really.
So what comes next for you? I mean, you mentioned this book, of course, and I'm sure there's plenty more Only Connect to come.
Yeah, there's more Only Connect to come. There's more. I think the big thing that I want to do with the quiz team is come up with our own TV quiz format, and we've got a few things sort of quietly in the works, but very pretty early stage, and they'll take time and effort. But yeah, my personal ambition is to do more quiz stuff, because that is where my absolute passion is. But equally, there's a lot of work still to be done on What3Words. So yeah, my role there evolves over time as the team gets bigger, and I'm kind of a generalist. So as a company gets bigger, you have specialists doing things. So you're trying to work out exactly where my role is there, and not just being the guy who can run a really fun Christmas quiz for the team. But that might be my role forever. I don't know. But yeah, have to wait and see.
How about a TV show where you try to top Only Connect, and nobody ever gets anything right? And if somebody gets one question right in one episode of the series, they get, I don't know, £1 million.
They win the prize. Yeah, that's something that's so hard. I think the difficult thing there is how you make it. I mean, that's quite an interesting idea. How you make something fun enough and sort of somehow just tangible enough. There is a new show that I haven't actually watched yet. I think Claudia Winkleman's hosting it, where it's called One Question, and the idea is they're just sitting on a sofa and you just got to answer one question, and if you get that right, then you win, and if you don't, you don't. But yeah, there's definitely more big, interesting quiz formats to be found, whatever they might be.
Well, Jack, thanks so much for doing this. I know how busy. Well, I don't know how busy you are because I can imagine very busy with two businesses to run. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It's been a pleasure to meet you.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure to have a chat, and yeah, great admirer of everything you do as well. So hopefully we can keep in touch on various topics.